times, the harsh treatment of colonialism was a condition no native Zambian.
On the granting of independence to colonial countries.
Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe, the freedom fighter who gave the country her name, the man who named her Zambia. 1958. After breaking away from the African National Congress, the ANC, which was led by Harry Mwangankumbula, Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe, Kenneth Kaunda, and other radical nationalist freedom fighters left to form a new political party and had to come up with the name of the country they were fighting for, which the new party was to be named after. Someone suggested the name Zambezia, and Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe said, "Why don't we just call it Zambia?" And it was so. The newfound political party was to be called Zambia African National Congress, and the Promised Land was now known as Zambia. This is one of the many stories of the iconic life of Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe.
Mr. Kapwepwe, what do you think you and your mission can do now by coming here?
Born on the 12th of April 1922 in Chinsali, of then the northern province of Northern Rhodesia, to his father Mulindwa Chupa Dominic Kapwepwe and his mother Chileshe Chimwangalala. He began his formal education at Chikwanda before attending his standard 3 and 4 at Mwenzo Mission School in Isoka. With the presence of two rival missions, the Presbyterian Livingstonian Mission of United Free Church of Scotland based at Lubwa and the Roman Catholic White Fathers missions at Ilondola, Chinsali proved to be a district of early educational development, with young Kapwepwe attending Lubwa Mission for his standard 5 and 6. He worked as a caddy on weekends, a way to raise funds for his school tuition, and in 1944, he worked as a driver for the Public Works Department and trained as a teacher and began his teaching career at Chinsali Primary School in 1945. He then moved to Lubwa Mission in 1946, and it was here where he again met the love of his life, Salome Chilufya Vesa, who was also a teacher at Lubwa Mission, and they got married in the August of 1946, and together they would go on to have 8 children. Looking back in trying to understand the days of the times, the harsh treatment of colonialism was a condition no native Zambian could bear, and throughout the continent of Africa, the native population suffered at the hands of imperialism, as they were oppressed during these times of colonialism by European powers in their respective lands. And these very actions would spark a fire of activism in the young Kapwepwe as he saw how Zambians were treated by the white settlers, who were seen to instill fear and an inferiority complex in the Africans, to look down on the African culture and heritage as it was seen to be primitive. See, Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe was a man who was installed with the values of dignity, respect and honesty through the teachings of his mother and other family members. His mother believed that all human beings are dignified and deserve such dignity from everyone and anyone. So, seeing how African workers were being treated at Lubwa Mission, this showed a type of hypocrisy towards the mission's Christian teachings that all races are equal, but in reality the missionaries favor the white mission workers against the African workers. And Kapwepwe will rise to the challenge of such treatments as this influenced his stance as a nationalist against imperialism. With his childhood friend, Kenneth Kaunda, who also attended Lubwa Mission as a pupil and would go on to teach at the same school, they created a strong friendship and they would travel to Tanganyika, present-day Tanzania, to look for work as teachers, together with their friend John Sokoni of Lubwa Mission. Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe found a job at Mulangeli Primary School in Tanganyika in 1947. He returned in 1948, and in his lifetime he would also work as an assistant welfare officer for the Quito Municipal Council and a primary school teacher at Wuzakili Primary School in 1949. The reality of colonialism saw the native Africans being sidelined in terms of equality and job opportunities, while the benefits of their mining labor were enjoyed by the white minority, who helped in the development in their European countries through the exploration of minerals and copper mining in African territories. Laws were implemented to benefit only white people, as these policies were not considered to infringe on human rights, as Africans were seen and deemed to be inferior. They could not vote, they were not allowed in white neighborhoods as movement was restricted to areas. Segregation was promoted in schools, churches, hospitals, shopping centers, and social meeting places. And this of course infuriated the native Africans, as they saw this as their land and the territory as their own. This would motivate our fathers and mothers to fight for equality and freedom in these very lands. With the knowledge of equality, they couldn't stand such treatments, so Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe and Kenneth Kaunda became founding members of the Northern Rhodesian African Congress, the first African political party in the country, founded in 1948, under the leadership of Godwin Bikusita Lewanika, a Barotse native with an aristocratic background, who helped Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe obtain his school scholarship to study in India in 1950, studying journalism and advanced leather goods and footwear manufacturing. In the year 1951, the political party would adopt the name Northern Rhodesian African National Congress, simply come to be known as the African National Congress, under the leadership of Harry Mwangankumbula, and was linked to the ANC of South Africa. Harry Mwangankumbula and Kenneth Kaunda failed to mobilize the people of the country against the establishment of the Central African Federation. The federation was formed in 1953. This was a colonial federation that consisted of 3 Southern African territories, the self-governing British colony of Southern Rhodesia, the British protectorates of Northern Rhodesia and Nyasaland, present-day Zimbabwe, Zambia and Malawi respectively. With the federation's first Prime Minister, Godfrey Martin Hudgens, who advocated for the British colonies of the region to become an independent state within the British Empire, while maintaining white minority rule, and only a selected few black people could vote. But the black people of these states were united in wanting to end colonialism in Africa. Upon his return, in the January of 1955, he found the ANC without a leader, as Nkumbula and Kaunda were both imprisoned for 2 months with hard labor for distributing literature that was considered subversive. So Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe became the acting president of the ANC, and when Nkumbula was released from prison, he would appoint him as the acting provincial organizer for Northern Rhodesia. And in the August of 1956, Kapwepwe became the treasurer of the ANC based in Lusaka. A path of revolution is one that does not guarantee a freedom fighter a paycheck or a salary at the end of the month, as Kapwepwe became unemployed because of the road that he chose to lead a way to independence, and the ANC would supply food for its members, and Kapwepwe knew that this was a small price to pay for the freedom of a whole nation.
Friends, when you ask for independence, when you ask for freedom, then at the same time you have asked for responsibilities. You cannot ask for independence without asking for responsibilities.
The voice of a freedom fighter can ease a people's pain through the struggle. It brings hope and guarantees a promise of a better tomorrow. Differences arose in the party, causing a rift. Allegedly, Nkumbula was seen as autocratic in his leadership and was said to be ready to accept the participation in national elections in 1958, which only allowed 25,000 Africans to vote. Nkumbula was seen as being willing to compromise on the issues of black majority rule and deemed to be influenced by white liberals. This led to the breaking away of Kenneth Kaunda, Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe, Scott Awina, and other nationalists to leave the ANC to form a new political party.
I left my leader because he accepted a constitution which was not good for us. So I left him and formed another party. We formed what was called the Zambia African National Congress.
And on the same day, Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe welcomed his twin daughters, Chileshe and Mulenga, into the world, so as the birth of the Zambian African National Congress on the 7th of October 1958. During this time, Kapwepwe completed writing the manuscript for his book, Shalapo Chani Chandala, and shortly after, the newfound political party was banned and declared illegal in the March of 1959 as being too militant because they couldn't change their minds for what they believed in their hearts, their stand for freedom as they wanted independence as soon as possible. Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe once said, "When you're a slave for too long, you don't feel like a slave anymore." And with that, they could never compromise the freedom of their people As the newspapers were splashed with the headlines, Zambia Congress, all leaders arrested. The governor of Northern Rhodesia, Sir Arthur Benson, compared its members to the Murder Inc. racketeers. The main targets were the top three leaders, Kaunda, the president, Sipalo, secretary general, and Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe, the treasurer general. Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe was arrested at his home in Chilenje, house number 177, and imprisoned for 9 months in Mongu, Barotseland. While the Zambia African National Congress leadership was imprisoned, Mwansa Chona and other nationalists from Zambia African National Congress formed the political party United National Independence Party, UNIP, on the 24th of October, 1959. December 1959. When Kapwepwe was released from prison, he would go on to join the newfound political party, together with his wife, Salome, who always kept the fire burning in the struggle for independence, even in his absence. Kapwepwe helped organize the provincial and district branches of UNIP in Barotseland. When Kenneth Kaunda was released from prison in the January of 1960, Mwansa Chona stepped down as the party president, as he didn't see himself as the main founder of the political party, and Kenneth Kaunda would be elected as the president of UNIP. Through the timeline of history, we have to understand that after the Second World War, Britain was now a crumbling empire and could no longer hold on to the power of their colonies in Africa, and with the rise of nationalism across the continent, this was a time for Africa to be free, a chance for independence. With Ghana gaining its independence from the British led by Kwame Nkrumah in 1957, it was now possible. The dream was now becoming reality. They could no longer wait to be free. So, in 1960, Kenneth Kaunda and Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe attended the Federal Review Conference in London together with Mwansa Chona and Harry Mongankumbula, and with the falling of the British Empire, this conference meant the beginning of the end of the Central African Federation. The road to our freedom was now clear, with the foundation of independence for Zambia and Malawi, but not yet for Zimbabwe.
When we look back the path which led to this conference room today, we cannot entirely forget, but we can certainly forgive.
In the October of 1962, there were elections in Northern Rhodesia. Kapwepwe challenged Dauti Yamba and won convincingly. The result of the election was a UNIP-ANC coalition government, in which Kapwepwe was given the ministerial role of African agriculture and Kaunda as the Minister of Local Government and Social Welfare. In the January of 1964, UNIP won the next general elections, where they won 55 seats, defeating their ANC rivals who had 10 seats, Kaunda becoming the first and only Prime Minister of Northern Rhodesia. Kapwepwe became the Minister of Home Affairs, and in the September of 1964, he was given the post of Minister of Foreign Affairs. The 24th of October, 1964, Independence Day. This is what they've been dreaming of all these years, from childhood friends to political heroes. Their names engraved on the cornerstone in the foundation of the country. The impossible was now achieved. The country of Zambia was finally free from colonialism. They had their own flag, their own coat of arms, their own national anthem, and the people of the land were now proud to be called Zambians. And Kaunda became the first president of the newly independent country of Zambia. He would go on to appoint Ruben Kamanga as the vice president.
In the name of Zambia, I thank you for receiving us into your community. We ask now to exercise our right as a member of the United Nations. Our declaration on the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples declares in part that 1. The subjection of peoples to alien subjection, domination and exploitation constitutes a denial of fundamental human rights.
There was a vociferous welcome for members of the United Nations Committee of 24 when they arrived in Lusaka last month to discuss aspects of colonialism. Minister for Foreign Affairs, Mr. Simon Kapwepwe, greeted the first delegates off the plane.
his time as Foreign Affairs Minister, the world would witness his speech to the British for failing to intervene after Rhodesia's unilateral declaration of independence by Ian Smith, who led the Rhodesian Front in 1965.
I want to put this on record, sir, that the government of Zambia would not agree to the British proposals. I'm sorry to say this, sir, that even if the Security Council passed this as a resolution, my government will not participate in the British proposals, because this, in short, means just one thing, that is to kill Zambia bit by bit. Now, he would be a foolish man, sir, who would accompany any man to go and buy his own coffin. And Zambia will not be prepared to accompany the British government to go and buy her own coffin. And therefore, I reject, sir, that we will not accept this.
Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe is one of the many faces of Pan-Africanism, and we have to put in consideration that Zambia might have been a small and newly independent country of Africa, but we stood for what is right. Our independence was not enough if our African brothers and sisters were still shackled by the hands of imperialism. We couldn't keep quiet while such injustice silenced the voice of the oppressed. We would stand and show support to our brothers and sisters across all borders, even when the odds were against us.
Voluntary sanction will fail. They never accepted this. We said this will fail. It has failed. The ambassador of Nigeria said this morning that the British could not come out and say, yes, it has failed. They cannot just come out and say to the world that, yes, it has failed, but they have just moved for another smokescreen to give all this which they have given before us, that this is another move which will impress the world. Now, it may impress the world, sir, but it cannot impress Zambia.
The story seems too familiar, like the narration that we have heard before, a tale of childhood friends drifting apart, as Kapwepwe and Kaunda's friendship seemed more to be distant. In the year 1967, Kapwepwe would lead a rebellion within UNIP that would see him stand against Ruben Kamanga for the position of deputy leader of the political party, in which Kapwepwe won the position. As a result, President Kenneth Kaunda would appoint him to the position of Vice President of the Republic of Zambia. He used this position to put forward economic policies that were different from those of President Kenneth Kaunda, and it was said that his views were sidelined. He advocated for the preservation of Zambian culture through the teaching of indigenous languages in schools, because you cannot teach your culture to your children in another man's language. He promoted the dependency on agriculture, as copper and other minerals or perishables that would one day diminish.
De l'avis du vice-président zambien Kapwepwe, l'unique solution est l'usage de la force.
We are what we wear, and in his words, what we wear must and can communicate to the world who we are and what we stand for. A message conveyed through his designing and tailoring of the 1955 morning shirt. On his return from India, when he found Nkumbula and Kaunda imprisoned, he influenced the change of dress code in Parliament to accept African attire. When he refused to wear a westernized suit, he would go on to change the dress code for the Zambia police after independence, from wearing shorts to trousers, because it was more orderly and dignified. His African attire portrays his belief for Africanity. We are what we wear. Africa being a mineral-rich continent, European powers did not want to let go of the control of the land. As Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe was quoted to have said, "If we don't handle our independence very well, colonizers will come back in form of investors." Colonialism is like a chameleon. It does not go away, but only changes colors. He was the finance minister from 1968 to 1969, and in the August of that year, he offered to resign as the vice president of the republic, as well as the deputy leader of UNIP. President Kenneth Kaunda did not want to lose him entirely, and he managed to change his mind. But in the year of 1970, Kenneth Kaunda would replace Kapwepwe with Mwansa for the position of Vice President, but allowed him to keep the post of Minister of Culture and Minister of Local Government. Rumors of a new political party called the United Progressive Party, formed on the Copper Belt, were linked to Mwansa Kapwepwe, but denied of such knowledge. Not until President Kenneth Kaunda dismissed 4 cabinet ministers on suspicions of being members of the new political party, while his time in UNIP was coming to an end. With everything they had been through, the struggles of colonialism, the sleepless nights, the dreaming of hope, fighting for their people, looking back to their friendship, their time in the ANC, the Zambia African National Congress, the fulfillment of UNIP to bring independence to their people, looking back and saying goodbye, as Kapwepwe resigned from UNIP and government. Then he announced that he was indeed the leader of the UPP, United Progressive Party. December 1971, Mufulira West by-elections. Mwansa Kapwepwe stood for the position of Member of Parliament but was banned from campaigning and still won, becoming the party's only representative in Parliament. Allegedly, President Kenneth Kaunda was not pleased with this information, and on the 4th of February 1972, UPP was banned, and more than 120 of its members were imprisoned, including Mwansa Kapwepwe. The excuse was that UPP was an instrument of the Rhodesian, South African and Portuguese government which favored white minority rule. UNIP had neutralized any threats Kapwepwe could pose.
I think it's a great discouragement to my party by taking this very capable young man to be put in detention.
If we can simply understand the philosophy in one of Mwansa Kapwepwe's lessons, it will be one of decolonizing the mind through the teachings of Zambian morality and values in trying to instill pride in our culture and languages as Africans. His unique approach to governance is one thought in my mind that cannot escape. His point of view was, if you adopt the very form of governance that was used to oppress you and your people, even if you gain your independence, you will use that very form of governing to oppress the very people that you freed. And it is evident in our country's history by the false accusation and false imprisonment of political rivals and others that challenge your leadership.
Even if some of our leaders are going to be detained, in fact this was done by the British. I'm one of those who was detained for 1 year, and when I came back I continued, and we won our victory.
This was started by the colonial government to oppress our nationalist and freedom fighters to stop them from speaking out.
I feel that even if all the central committee of our party was detained, the masses will be in a position to find another set of leadership to guide them until we come back. And therefore, I am not frightened, and I know the government, and I heard that they were planning to kill my party in its infancy. They will create a lot of cases to pin on my party, and this was long before it was born, and therefore I'm prepared for these hardships.
Mwansa Kapwepwe was imprisoned until the 31st of December 1972. At that time, people used to say that Zambia had 2 specific advantages over other countries of Africa: its copper mines and its young idealistic leader in President Kenneth Kaunda, who believed that political oppositional parties can only be eliminated by voters, but that belief was now abandoned, taking drastic steps in abolishing all the country's oppositional parties under the chairperson of Mwansa, the introduction of the Chona Commission of February 1972. This was to make recommendations for the constitution of a one-party participatory democracy, also known as the one-party state. There was no doubt that the proposal will pass, as President Kenneth Kaunda's supporters held 83 of the 105 seats in the National Assembly, way over the amount needed to bring the new system into effect. Against the largest opposition, the ANC of Harry Mwangankumbula, which only had 21 seats, and converting Zambia into a one-party state.
Understood and practiced or intended to be done by primitive and savage.
And the one surviving political party would of course be Kaunda's UNIP.
I said from time to time that I am not afraid of competition.
anyone can challenge me for this post, or he will be getting after sleepless nights. And if the people of Zambia want him to take over or her from me, they're welcome.
As Kaunda assures the people, there is no cause for fear. There is no basis for believing that power will be abused as the country was heading into the Second Republic. Childhood friends become political enemies. The Second Republic was inaugurated on the 1st January of 1973, the day after Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe was released from detention.
On November 1st, 1973,
the harassment of Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe continued even after passing the one-party state law. He was arrested on the February of 1973 for the possession of 2 illegal firearms, and he received a 2-year suspended sentence.
As the very first general election under the one-party constitution,
he was attacked by UNIP cadres, badly beaten, and almost died when he was looking for an office in Kamwala in 1973. He sued the Zambia Broadcasting Services, the Times of Zambia, and the Zambia Daily Mail for libel in reporting that Kapwepwe had sent people for military training outside the country. He would go on to win the case after proving that those were false reports. The idea in letting go of presidential power is a story Africa now knows by heart, and when that power is threatened, democracy has to be sidelined for the rule of the Iron Fist to prevail. As Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe turned his back on politics to move to his farm in Chinsali. But in the spirit of national unity, President Kenneth Kaunda would ask Kapwepwe to return to UNIP in the September of 1977, in which he did. But to test his longtime friend's honesty, Kapwepwe would challenge President Kenneth Kaunda to UNIP's one-party presidential nomination in 1978, together with Harry Monga Nkumbula, but they were both disqualified by last-minute changes to UNIP's constitution. After these actions and seeing that his longtime childhood friend could not let go of power, Kapwepwe retired for good from politics and returned to live his life in Chinsali. 26th of January, 1980. The morning newspapers read, former Zambian Vice President dies 2 days after suffering from a stroke while visiting his daughter, Dr. Sampa Kapwepwe, in Kalulushi. About 15,000 people attended his burial on his farm in Chinsali district, following the royal Bemba burial rites for his funeral on the 31st of January, 1980. The story will be narrated many times, and many times differently, written with different words, told from a different perspective. And one thing that we have to remember, these were noble men and women who had courage, and the things that they did was for the glory of the country. They were not mere politicians, they were freedom fighters who became political through their activism. So before they looked at politics, they first looked at the policies that would benefit the people of the land. So when we tell the story of the foundation of our country, we have to remember that these were great men and women. And what a man, with a presence of dignity on his mind and the love for his people in his heart. And to a whole country, he's a freedom fighter, an iconic figure of liberation. He is also an idea that when you stand, you become strong for the weak who cannot stand for themselves. And you will always be brave when you stand for what is right. He was an author, an educator, a vision for Zambia's future. This is the story of Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe, the man who named the country after the Zambezi River, the man who called her by name, Zambia.
What other methods do you mean? Do you mean force?
I mean force. We have found that force is unavoidable now.
How strong do you think this force should be?
Well, it's very difficult to go into details, but I'd like the principle to be accepted by the British government.